In a world where film, television, video games, technology, toys, lawnmowers, dark matter.
Wait a minute. Lawnmowers, dark matter?
Sorry. Where most of those things meet, one podcast stands alone, going behind the scenes.
Hold on to your butts.
I love it when a plan comes together.
You're listening to the Mediajuice Podcast.
Howdy, Mediajuice friends, listeners, watchers. I guess they can't watch, can they? This is not a video podcast.
No.
No. I've seen those where it's like the same podcast, but there's an audio version and a video version. Have you seen those?
Yeah, I think that's becoming less and less a thing, in my opinion. But
yeah.
I know what you're talking about. I've seen a few of those in my day.
Yeah, I feel like for the medium of podcasting, obviously audio is the way to go. And I always get confused. Like there was one that I followed about filmmaking, and I would always click on the one that was video, and then it would take forever to stream. So
yeah,
we are audio only here at Mediajuice.
That's right. You can listen to us in the car and not get
right.
in a wreck because you're trying to also watch us.
The irony being what we actually do at Mediajuice is a very visual medium or audio visual, and the podcast being only audio.
Yeah. Well, storytelling is transient, I guess.
There we go. So off of that rabbit trail and onto the new rabbit trail of Qbert. So you guys, anyone who's of Jeremiah and I's age will know who this next gentleman is. I had fun talking with him. Warren Davis is a guy that I met years ago. Is the co-creator of Qbert, the classic video game, and we talked with him about origins and predictions of the future and lots of fun stuff. So I think I think young and old, I think if you know what Qbert is, it's nostalgic, but then it's kind of educational and fun to hear if you don't know what that is from one of the old veterans of the industry.
Yeah, that's right. He definitely is a person who was an influencer and a mover and shaker early on in the video game industry. And it's a great interview. It's a lot of fun. Very nostalgic, like you said.
Yeah, it went places that I didn't expect, which is part of what I've enjoyed most about this is you expect, like talking to Randy Pitchford, you expect it to be all about game design, and it's like, no, we rabbit trail into, artistry and the, sort of opinions and theories on, different industries. And that's kind of how a lot of these conversations have gone, which shows and confirms in me, it's like, no one is just a one-dimensional person. Everybody, whether you're labeled as a game designer or a filmmaker or a musician, obviously that is one thing that you've done successfully that you've put out in the world, but it doesn't mean that's all you can do,
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, good stuff. It's true. I think the more creative people are, you do see them not maybe so laser focused on one outlet or one medium. It becomes, like you're doing a podcast right now. You do a very visual work with Mediajuice Studios, but there's another outlet that comes out of that, and it's another way for you to tell your story and the story of what you do in your life and the studio. So yeah,
I dig it. It's good. Multi-dimensional.
That's right. We are not two-dimensional beings. As Yoda says, luminous beings are we.
Yes, not this crude matter.
That's right. All right, so on top of the Warren Davis interview, which is packed full of good audio listening and good radio type stuff, we're also going to jump into cutscenes and talk about the Jerry before Seinfeld special on Netflix, which is actually, I say special, but it's a comedy special / documentary. So we'll get into that a little bit. And we're going to take a look behind the curtain there at Mediajuice Studios and look at some work that's being done for Sabre, which is a little deviation of the norm for Mediajuice Studios because it's more of a corporate type.
Yeah. Sabre, not Sega.
Right.
We were joking about, the name of the client is Sabre. And so we always call him Sabre.
I always go to the office with Sabre when they all thought it was
yes.
Sabre. We've got that going on, and of course, we'll be taking your questions and comments in the script notes section. So I think we should just go.
I think we're ready to launch this thing.
I don't think of Q*bert as being, that important.
There's a few just kind of dramatic elements in there.
Really good adjectives to describe how amazing the show is.
There are some amazing training videos. Hey, everybody. So as we said in the intro, welcome to the Mediajuice podcast, another edition of what we call the Green Room, where we talk to friends of mine who I've worked with in front of the camera, behind the camera, and I'm really excited about this week because we have my pal Warren Davis here. And Warren, for the uninitiated, is the co-creator of Q*bert. As we all know and love that game. And Warren and I met 4 or 5 years ago at the Classic Gaming Expo when I was shooting Video Games the Movie. And we mentioned this on the last episode, Warren. It's sort of like, with Lewis Castle and Nolan Bushnell and you and a lot of these game pioneers, it's like, as a filmmaker, I felt like when I met one of you guys, I met all of you because everybody knows everybody. Is that fair? Is that a fair assumption?
Well, it's funny you say that. I really didn't know a lot of these guys. I was pretty sheltered when I was in the industry. I worked for 2 companies, worked for Williams and Gottlieb, not in that order. But, so I knew a bunch of people, but there were tons of people I didn't know. And I find that I meet these guys when I go to the retro gaming shows. So a lot of these guys I've only met in the last 10 years or so.
Oh, wow. Well, and I'm sure you get this question a million times. And so instead of asking you again about the origins of Q*bert and that whole story, which I do want to talk about, I've never heard the story of how did you make the transition from game designer to an actor? You're an actor now, is that right?
Well, yeah, to be honest, I've always been. I started both tracks around the same time, which is in college. I was studying computer engineering, and that's what I got my degree in. But that was also the first time I did a play. And before I did a play, I had no interest in acting whatsoever. In high school, I stayed as far away from the drama club as possible. It just wasn't interesting to me. Ironically, in high school, the other thing that did interest me was filmmaking. So I was an amateur filmmaker in high school, and equally interested in computers. So those were sort of my 2 main interests. But I went and studied computers in college, and that's when a friend who was into into doing plays and stuff, he sort of dragged me to an audition, and just because I was a fairly entertaining guy. And
I can attest to that.
I ended up auditioning for a play, and I got cast, and so that kind of got me, interested in acting.
It's interesting to think about now because I think back in those days, whenever it was the 70s, early 80s, that the art and science I felt like lived in 2 very different camps. Video games. Game designers, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I feel like the thought was like, oh, well, those are all coders and nerds, and the artists, actors and performers and filmmakers, they're over in this camp, and neither the tween shall meet. But now it's like, well, video games there's no question that it's seen as an art form, and this merging of art and science, virtual reality and where we are now. Have you sort of made that connection of those two, and how did you view it back, when you were first getting started?
Well, I think there's definitely some truth in what you're saying, is that they've come way far together. But even back in the day, video games, there were artists, there were guys who were, not nerds and not programmers, and we worked together. So it was an interesting melding of the art world and the technology world just to create even, the earliest video games. as an actor, though, I mean, that's a different thing. There's certainly no actors in video games back in the day. And I found that I just kept those two worlds very separate. Like, I did not share with anybody at my day job, which was making video games, that I was doing, theater in the evenings and weekends. And I wasn't, really big on telling people in the acting world that I was making video games during the day. So, because I kind of felt, and I think there was some truth to this, that you kind of get labeled. Like, if you're an actor and you tell people, oh, well, I make video games, you go, oh, well, you're a video game designer who's, pretending to be an actor, and they don't take you seriously. And so I was just cognizant of that, and I really did try to keep things separate. And it wasn't until I think I moved to Los Angeles that I sort of let the curtain fall a little bit and share. Well, I did share in the later days at Williams. I sort of shared my involvement. So some of the guys there knew that I was doing plays and stuff. Now
with motion and performance capture, that's a very big part of gaming now. Like I mentioned this on a previous episode when we were talking to Allison Hayslip. We were, it was like the second day of E3, and she said, hey, you want to come meet me for drinks? I'm meeting the cast of the new Call of Duty for drinks. And I kind of took a step back. I was like, there was a time when you couldn't say that there wasn't actors that were the quote unquote cast of this video game. But now, very much so with motion capture and performance capture. Did you ever foresee that? Like, I know you worked on some of the Aerosmith, what did they call that, where they captured it wasn't mocap, it was something else.
It was, and it was video digitization. We were basically digitizing two-dimensional video to create the 2D sprites that we used in our games, because, it was a 2D environment as opposed to 3D. Yeah, performance capture all came, out of using 3D systems. But the interesting thing you say about actors, I actually, the second game I ever made after Q*bert featured actors, which was Us versus Them, which was a Laserdisc game.
Oh, and
it relied very heavily on performance, which was very radical for that time. There really were no live actors in video games. So, in a way, I've been, that's been part of my DNA from the beginning. And even at that time, the thing that got us so jazzed about video discs was that ability to put actual full motion video and incorporate that into a video game somehow. And then my work with video digitizing, which happened after Us versus Them, and really just became possible because of the hardware that was available. That got me excited because, again, just the idea of having live actors, which again, we used from NARC, through High Impact Football, Mortal Kombat, Terminator 2, and then, as you say, Aerosmith, and many other games, NBA Jam. So, yeah, we, at Williams, with having pioneered this video digitizing technology, we had live actors all the time.
That's interesting. You don't, and I'm assuming that, this is a sort of a dumb thought now that it comes into my brain and it's coming out of my mouth. But back then, the actors would have to come into your company. You'd have to, at the very least, photograph them, or would you video them to get that information for the digital artists to then recreate them? Correct?
Well, we built a blue screen studio with video cameras, with lighting, with a treadmill, where we took the top of the treadmill down so we could rotate it and get all the angles we needed. So frequently, it was most convenient, obviously, to bring people into our blue screen studio, and that's what we did with Aerosmith. But we also, at times, went out into the field and videotaped under different circumstances. And basically, what we'd have to do then is, if we didn't have access to a blue screen studio, we would have to strip out the background. The artists would have to strip out the background, which is time consuming, but if that was the only option. Like for Terminator 2, I don't know who it was, but somebody went out to California and videotaped Robert Patrick and Eddie Furlong so that their images were in the game. Linda Hamilton, we got her stunt double. And for Arnold, we got his stunt double with an Arnold mask. which I guess they were using for shots as well. But and so somebody went out and videotaped them, and that's how we got the images that we used in the game.
Wow. Music is the revolution. I think that just popped into my head. Wasn't that like the tagline in the Aerosmith? What was the name of that game?
Is the weapon.
Music is the weapon.
Revolution X, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Revolution X. And the gun was, designed to, it shot CDs. That was why music was your weapon. It was shooting CDs out.
That's hilarious. Wow. I mean, it's to me, and I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I mean, coming from your lineage of Qbert and creating that character to then video digitization to, obviously your work as an actor. Do you have any predictions about what's happening in augmented reality, virtual reality, what the next step is in gaming, or is it sort of, do you feel like we've plateaued and we're going to live in this 4K HD virtual reality space for a while?
Well, you know what? I wish I could predict the future. I've certainly tried, but in the past, but you never can tell. I'm a believer in 3D. When even back in the day when it was terrible, I still preferred it to 2D. And 3D movies, for example, I don't really get how they haven't caught on. I love watching movies in 3D. It's just, again, they have to be done well, but I love that. And virtual reality, I mean, the virtual reality headsets I've tried, are just fantastic. I mean, the original Oculus, the resolution was an issue, but lately I've been playing around with the Sony PlayStation VR, and it's just phenomenal. It
is.
I do think there are issues that still need to be worked out. Like, I think most VR, you need to be sitting down. I think standing up is just really dangerous and potentially disorienting. But man, if you can design the 3D, the virtual reality experience around being seated, that's like a phenomenal experience. And again, I think we'll get to the place where you could be wireless and you can move and you can create a safe space and things like that. But I think we have some work to do there. But I'm a huge believer in VR. I think it's phenomenal, and I think eventually we'll get there. I don't know exactly when or how soon.
With all of your experience in the industry and everything you've done over the past 3 decades, have you ever thought about getting back into game design or any inklings there of like tinkering with something again?
Yeah, sometimes I think about it. I certainly have ideas that I never got to explore, but then I think about what the reality is of it, and it's that the industry has sort of turned into a kind of like the movie industry. There's the blockbusters, there's the studio pictures, which you're sort of having to deal with sort of these overlords who are imposing sort of goals on you that maybe aren't the most artistic goals. And then there's the indie scene, which I think is much more attractive, where you have freedom, you have artistic freedom, but you may not get the marketing backing, or you may not get the widespread audience. But I don't know. Each has its pluses and each has its minuses. But I do think about it. I also think it's fine for a new generation to take over. I had my shot and I made my mark, and there's nothing wrong with a new generation taking over. That being said, I actually am, working these days with Sony on some VR related stuff, but which I'm enjoying, but
that's cool.
I am sort of keeping my finger in it.
Yeah,
I've never really taken my pinky. I haven't really taken my toe out of the water. I've been somewhat part of the industry marginally.
It's sort of like I think about the landscape of gaming, film, television now, and how it has there has been a bit of a merging, or a lot of merging, not just in the mediums themselves and how games look more like movies now, and and that whole thing. But in, as you said, in the approach, the video game publishers and the industry as a large is much more like it's like Hollywood now than it was, I'm sure, when you were starting. Which some say, sort of started with like when the big money came in before the crash with Warner buying Atari, and then of course there was the crash and everything went away for a while. But I just wonder if there a couple of points here that I'd love to get your opinion on. One, will we ever see another crash in the video game space? And two, the economics of games, of how they're made and how they're distributed, do you see that changing or evolving, and if so, how?
Well, let's see. As far as a crash goes, again, I try not to predict the future, especially when it comes to business matters. I'm not a businessman or a business expert, so I honestly, I just don't know. It really depends on what people do. Because, the reason, I think there was a reason for the crash of arcade games, for example, in the mid-'80s. It's because everybody jumped on a bandwagon and oversaturated the market with bad material. Everybody thought, I can just put any game out and it's going to sell. And then, of course, it crashed because there was oversaturation with too much bad material. So it has to do with people and what people do. If people are cautious, if people in the industry are cautious and smart about what they do, I don't think there would be a crash. And also, the pinball industry was up and down from its inception. It was, there were high times and low times, and the manufacturers just learned to, they understood what they had to do to cope with those fluctuations. So if you have an industry of people who can do that, there won't be a crash. But if you have an industry of people who can't do that or are greedy or whatever, then there's a definite possibility of a crash in the future. And then the second part of your question, they have changed so much. So much content is delivered online as opposed to actual media that you buy. So I think we're going to definitely continue in that direction. But again, it really depends on the technology. So as new technologies are developed, I think that's going to, sort of change. It's going to change up the way people do business. But I don't know what those changes are, and I'm not going to predict because, again, I'm not that tapped into, to those kind of things.
Well, you're a very smart man to not predict, because it's as soon as you predict, it's like I've done that too. I predicted way back in the cellular days that cellular would always remain analog because of the towers, but I didn't think about digital coming from a satellite. I remember back to those early conversations of like, it'll always be cellular. And obviously the world's changed, that whole industry's changed. But I think about, even in my world in filmmaking, how much it's changed just in the 15 years of running my production company. When I started, it was like if I wanted to shoot a commercial for Atari, or Atari 2.0, that is, sort of when they got into the Xbox and PlayStation era, it's like I didn't know. I'd just hire a DP and hire a crew, and they'd shoot, not on film, but on tape, and I'd watch them and learn. And just how now with DSLR and the digital revolution, that's sort of how I cut my teeth as a filmmaker in learning, is on DSLR. And how it's like that wasn't an option for aspiring filmmakers even 20 years ago. And it really wasn't an option for aspiring game designers 20 or 25 years ago. But now both, it's like the barriers to entry are they're not just low, they're non-existent, it kind of, I'd be curious to get your opinion on this. It kind of creates a two-part. One, there's no barrier to entry. So there's no obstacle. But two, I don't know, I feel like sometimes necessary pressure to create ambition in an artist is also not there, because it's like, well, you can do it just like anybody else can. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's, it's sort of a double-edged sword, I think. It's because it's so easy to do, so many people will do it or will attempt to do it. but they may not have the skill. It's like everybody's not a Fellini or an Alfred Hitchcock, but anybody who wants to can go ahead and make their film. And then the question is, how do you sift through the quantity of product to get to those gems or to get to those things that speak to you? So I personally think that this sort of lowering of the entry barrier has created a difficulty in quality, or a lower, let's say a lowering of quality. It's hard for those things that really are good to reach an audience.
Yeah,
because it's hard to find. There's just too much chatter out there. And it's the same thing, I think, with game design. As it becomes easier, as the tools to make a game become, easier, that's wonderful. But then you've got a lot of people making games who, when there's too much stuff, it's hard for people to evaluate everything to decide what's good and what's not good. So
when I worked in a studio in the late 90s, recording bands and regional and national acts and things like that. And we would always talk about, because that revolution was coming, the day was coming when you could record an album in your basement, if you had the computer or a couple microphones or whatever. But the saying that we always threw out was, it's not the gear, it's the guy. It's not just acquiring these things that you need. You also have to have that ability for it. So you can really dilute the quality of production that's out there by just doing it on the fly. And that's, if you want to do that, you want to spend the money and do that, that's fine. But that's kind of that concept that goes, like you said, across with gaming and filmmaking and everything. Is it's not so much the gear, the things, it's something that's almost intangible, I guess, that is what makes quality, whatever it is that you're doing.
It's like it makes me think of there's a famous line that Steven Spielberg has said or has talked about when talking to sort of aspiring filmmakers, screenwriters. I remember him saying this. He's like, I'm much less impressed or interested in someone that's shot a film that's technically beautiful and lit well and has special effects or even has good editing. I'm more interested in someone that, has a shitty camera and it's not lit and they don't really understand cinematography, but they know how to tell a story and they're a natural storyteller, because all that other stuff you can teach, but you can't really teach that core creativity and intuition.
Right.
And I think that's true. And can creativity be taught? Absolutely. Because I've seen both. I've seen editors that have come into Mediajuice that knew nothing, and we've taught them, and they've blossomed into artists. And then of course there's just the outliers that just sort of know it intuitively, and you can tell the hardware itself, just being able to go to a place that was set up and fostered that being able to design and come up with it's like for you, and I'm sure you've gotten this a lot, but I mean, it's like to how does it feel to have a character like Hubert that's just a seminal part of pop culture and is in every arcade in the world?
Well, gee, I never thought about that way. I don't know about seminal. I mean, some people, it's amazing that people remember the game and the character. I'm very, grateful and happy about that. But, it doesn't, it hasn't really affected my life in a huge way. I mean, it's affected it in a small way. And like I said, it's very gratifying to meet people who are fans and things like that. But, I don't think of Hubert as being, that important in popular culture. He's just a little footnote at best.
It was funny last night. I told my wife about the interview, and I said, "Oh, it's the guy that did Hubert." She's like, "No way!" And my kids were like, "Who?" And I go, "The guy in Wreck-It Ralph." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that."
Well, that's the thing, and it's really been that way all through the years, that, if Kubert comes up and for whatever reason, some people, I'd say a small percentage are like, oh my God. And then, there's a large percentage who are like, yeah, I don't know what that is.
I think it's a generational thing too, but yeah.
Keeps you humble.
Sure,
Yeah.
Exactly. So I know we are super short on time. I would love to talk with you about your film and your acting work. Maybe we'll set up something again where we can chat about that side of your artistic endeavors. But we want to honor your time and your time frame too, so we don't want to hold you too long.
Yeah, thanks,
here.
Warren. Thanks for jumping on.
No worries. Happy to talk to you guys anytime.
Thanks a lot, Warren, for your time, and we enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Well, that's right. It's time once again for cutscenes, and today we're talking Seinfeld. I feel like we should be hearing like a quirky bass line right now, but we'll probably get sued for that. But yeah, Jerry Before Seinfeld released just this last week. It was really recently on Netflix.
Yeah, on Netflix.
And they've been doing a lot of comedy specials. Like they did the whole Dave Chappelle thing. Oh, what's the guy with the ventriloquist dummies?
Oh yeah,
he's got one out.
I've seen that on there too. Yeah,
yeah. And so this Jerry Seinfeld one dropped, and it's called Jerry Before Seinfeld, and it's a melding of the comedy special and a documentary. So
yeah, and I was, obviously I've been a huge Seinfeld fan as millions of other people are, but I saw it drop and I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to watch that. And what surprised me about it was it is this kind of multi-genre thing. It's part documentary, part stand-up special, part almost drama. It's got some of the segments that they film where this spoiler alert.
Yes.
There's this one section where he's sitting on like a street or an alleyway, and it's paved with all of his material, the pages of all of his bits that he's done, paving the street. And it's almost like something out of a drama. But I enjoy, other than, Seinfeld being hilarious and it being new bits that you've not heard before, hearing a little bit about his origins, how he got into it when it delves into the documentary pieces, I thought was really cool. Did you pick up on that initially, like them going back and forth?
Yeah, and I guess I never realized that he started stand-up in the 70s. It was 76 or 77, and so they take you all the way back there, and he's like this, and they do it at the Comic Strip, which is a fabled club in New York City, and he says, this is the stage that I first told jokes on. It's where I first did the comedy thing, was on this stage. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize I was in for this sort of walk down memory lane on what Seinfeld is and where he started. Yeah. And they go back to his childhood home. He talks about his family and how his parents were both orphans, and just fascinating stuff. And
I thought it was, like I said, when I started seeing like, oh, this is a comedy special / documentary, and they're doing both of these things, it's very refreshing to me, because as a documentary filmmaker, you hear all the things that people say, that, mentors and teachers and people that I've learned from, which is basically just, all the greats, Spielberg, Scorsese, Coppola, deep diving on all their filmography and watching behind the scenes. And of course, great documentary filmmakers like Morgan Spurlock, and I'm going blank. Who's the guy who talks very much like, is it Werner Herzog? Yeah, I think Werner Herzog. Correct me if I'm wrong. He did like, Into the Darkness or Into the Abyss, and a bunch of other famous documentaries. You hear like, okay, here's how you do it, and here's how not to do it. And I remember watching a documentary one time called, I think it was The Thin Blue Line. I was about to say Thin Red Line. I think that was Oliver Stone. Thin Blue Line, I think, is the name of it. It's a documentary that it's part documentary, but part like they film dramatic sequences to kind
right.
of fill in the gaps where they don't have archival footage or they don't have, they just have to kind of shoot it like it's a movie. Like when I saw that, I was like, oh, wow, this is very cool. Like this is not all documentary archival footage, talking heads, voiceover, like what all documentaries are, like Ken Burns style.
Right.
This is like documentary drama, almost docudrama.
Mm-hmm.
And which kind of like freed me up as a documentary filmmaker. Like, oh, well, you can really do anything. If you want to go set it up and shoot it and put it in your, it can be anything. These genres are defined because those are the well-trodden paths of like, oh, okay, write a drama, shoot a drama,
mm-hmm.
plan a stand-up comedy special, shoot that, plan a documentary, shoot that with the available tools to you. But really, no, it's like it could be all those things, kind of like this Seinfeld thing, which is just cool to see that that's still happening and happening at, with the 800-pound gorilla Netflix.
Yeah. Well, and I think the interesting thing, like you said, it's not that cookie cutter thing. Like they could have easily, with Jerry Seinfeld's name, just done a comedy special and it would have been a huge success and everybody would have loved it and everything, because Jerry Seinfeld is funny and popular. But they did decide, hey, let's go a little deeper. Let's do something a little out of the norm. And I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. And
to me, it's almost like, I mean, I see it from both sides. On the one hand, it's like you look at it from Jerry Seinfeld's point of view. It's like, yeah, I could do another comedy special, but he's at the top of his game, and it's like,
right. Why does he have to do that?
Why does he have to do that? Why would he want to do that?
Right.
So whether Netflix pitched this to him or he pitched it to Netflix,
sure.
It's both parties being willing to embrace something fresh and new and different. It's just cool to see Netflix and Seinfeld together. Whoever pitched who on it, that's
which is interesting because Hulu currently has the exclusive rights to the TV show. Seinfeld.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah, Seinfeld's on Hulu, but you can't get it anywhere else. They paid, I'm sure, millions and millions of dollars to make that happen. But
well, that's really smart on Seinfeld's part. It's like, okay, we're going to be over here exclusively, but then we're going to do a comedy special on Netflix. And,
right.
But
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked how even during the comedy segments, he talked about his history and his past, and he told like the first joke that he ever told on that stage.
Yeah.
He did that. And there were even segments where he took questions from the crowd, like, hey, does anybody have any questions? And there were, they would cut those in, and just really, really well done. I enjoyed it very thoroughly.
Yeah, I did too. And I think it's for anyone listening, if you're going to watch it, number one, watch it because it's very entertaining.
Definitely.
But number two, look at it through the point of view of documentary filmmaking, of comedy, special writing, creation from a comedic standpoint. And then, there's a few just kind of dramatic elements in there, the cinematography and the way they capture some elements. You'll if you kind of put that hat on as you're watching it, you'll see it through through a different lens, which I think it just makes it that much more interesting to watch.
We are tonight's entertainment.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You can't handle the truth.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
All right, today, Behind the Curtain, we are going to talk about, like we said in the intro, not Sabre or Sega.
Sabre.
But Sabre. So just tell us what's been going on with Sabre and the videos you've been producing for them.
Well, Sabre is a client that we brought on board, I want to say about a year ago. One of my contacts at Mauser Electronics, who we had worked with on the Grant Imahara Innovation Spotlight series and a lot of the great promotional videos we've done there, she actually moved over to Sabre and called me and said, "Hey, I'm at Sabre now." I was like, "Oh wow, that's Sabre's an even bigger company than Mauser."
Yeah.
For those who don't know, it's kind of I guess the best way to describe it is travel logistics software. It's all kind of behind the scenes stuff that happens with computers and software to support, the airline industry, hotels. Okay. And so for people that are travel managers at a company, booking travel for their employees, chances are they're using some type of Sabre product. Whether it's booking the travel or managing travelers or costs, they have all these different suite of tools. Very successful company. And yeah, it's been interesting to, take off the hat of, making a TV spot for Street Fighter or an official trailer for Amazon for Game of Thrones, or, all of the stuff that we do that's very much in the vein of film and television and video game for entertainment content to now the corporate world. Very similar to Mauser in that it's like, okay, this is a corporate client, quote unquote, but it doesn't mean that people, their audience, say for Mauser, it's engineers; for Sabre, it's travel managers. They're still people that want to be entertained, that want to be engaged. So I think the worst thing to do that when we first started diving into work with corporate clients, it's like, well, if anything, we should keep our hat of entertainment, sizzle videos, out of the box thinking on, because that treatment applied to a corporate client could be really fresh and could be like exactly what they're looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think when you hear, corporate video, whatever it is, you think it's like the 1950s educational videos. Straight, boring, deadpan.
Your air travel and you.
Right. I who hasn't sat through some really lame training video and just thought, why would they do this to me? Like, is this some kind of test?
Yeah.
So I think when you approach a corporate video from an entertainment standpoint and kind of apply that kind of engaging factor, I guess, to it, or, production bent, then I think you're onto something there.
As a total rabbit trail, you said training video a while ago. It made me think of, I don't remember when this was. It might have been when we were in production on Unlocked. But just doing research, I've always been interested in doing a documentary or documentary series on Blockbuster. Just the rise of home video and the craze of that, and in the fall. There are some amazing training videos that made their way onto YouTube that were obviously, internal only Blockbuster employee training.
Sure.
And they are just the cheesiest, but now just most amazing things to watch.
Yeah.
That, you can tell that they're trying to like make it interesting and engaging to their employees. But I mean, it is just horrifically amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I did a stint with Burger King as a teenager, and I can still remember the awful training videos. I'm like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, go sit in the back room behind the fryers and watch this little 19-inch CRT TV and watch this 20-minute training video.
Yeah, I'm like, this job is already terrible. Like, you don't have to convince me not to like it.
So funny. Anyway, total rabbit trail, but I think proves the point even more of like everybody has in their mind, like you said, these cheesy training videos or even corporate videos in the early like 2000s. I feel like when corporations started to see like, okay, the internet and we can communicate with customers outside of just TV ads, or we can get our message out there to various audiences that aren't just in front of a TV. I feel like that's evolved now to where thankfully companies like Mediajuice, like me, can have a shot at some of this corporate work. And this video we put together is a very non-traditional kind of high impact trailer to market to that audience that, when they go public with it, we'll throw it up on the Mediajuice website.
Yeah, cool.
The content isn't necessarily exciting, but making it exciting and bringing out the elements that actually are interesting is a fun challenge.
It stretches you, because instead of just being in this exciting world of video games and Capcom and everything that you guys do, pushes your limits a little bit to, all right, how do we take something that can be completely dry and boring and put a spin on it that's going to make it be engaging and fun and people are going to want to watch. So
yeah, I think that's an interesting challenge for anybody, and any, whatever your medium or your work is if it's not that interesting to you, there is a way to make it interesting, to sort of take as Christopher Walken in Catch Me If You Can says, churn that cream into butter.
Right.
Make something interesting of something that may seem uninteresting.
Okay, it's that time of the show again when we get to interact with you and you get to, in a way, communicate with us. And that is the script note section. And today we're going to Instagram. You can always find Mediajuice Studios on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as well as MediajuiceStudios.com. But today's questions actually both come from Instagram. And the first one is from Sean Coleman, who commented on the Game of Thrones, you're doing the character vignettes for season 7, and the second one is with the Hound and Davos Seaworth, and he asks, did you get to go on set to film these interviews?
That's funny. No, the short answer is no, we didn't. But they were a lot of fun to produce. We had to work with our client. I shouldn't say had to. What am I saying? Like it's a burden. We worked with our client, Amazon Channels, had a lot of fun producing these. There's 4 total cast vignettes that basically asking the question, what's your character's evolution throughout the series up to this point? So a lot of interesting answers from the different cast members, and our job is obviously to bring that to life with footage from the show and bring the incredible soundtrack in, and then just let the talent kind of speak to their character, which they do very well. And with this, not unlike any documentary style filmmaking or just interview editorial type approach to editing, is you film a lot more than what you can put into a final edit. So these are all anywhere from 15 to 20 minute interviews that need to be kind of culled down to 2 and 3 minute segments that people will actually watch. And so that's always a fun challenge of like, okay, how do we take the meat of what they're saying about their character and the character's journey, cut that into a 2 or 3 minute interview. So yeah, we had fun producing them. We didn't get to go on set. That would have been, I would have almost done it for free just to have that as a payment on the side.
All right. So the next question comes again from Instagram, and Frank Perry actually commented on the post that went up about the last episode, the Lewis Castle episode. And he asks, what is Amazon Game Studios' next release?
Oh,
do you have any insight on that?
Let me just tell you my private conversation with Lewis Castle. Let me tell you all their plans and all their releases for the next 6 months. Okay,
good.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Oh wait, the audio cut out. Just kidding. No, I don't know. I wish I did. As you probably heard if you listened to the Lewis Castle episode, when we approached that question with him,
he danced very nicely.
Yes, and I actually kind of felt bad because I do remember us emailing ahead of time about, he said, I'm happy to talk about my past and the history, at Westwood and all of his, like I said, rich history in gaming, but can't really talk about what's upcoming because they haven't really rolled out all those PR plans and announcements and stuff. So short answer is I don't know, and even if I did, I couldn't say. But
yeah, and I mean, I guess if you want to speculate, if you just look at what Amazon is as a whole, I mean, they've taken on every major retailer. They're taking on Apple Music. They're taking on Netflix. I mean, so you got to think whatever they're doing on the gaming side is going to be nothing short of revolutionary or, really groundbreaking, because Amazon isn't in the business of just doing something small and seeing if it works. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, you look. Your point is very, very well made. I mean, they kind of go big or go home with those guys.
Right.
We were actually, and again, I should clarify, this is total speculation on my
Absolutely.
part. I have no inside track to Amazon Game Studios and what they're doing, but we were talking internally, and we thought, it would not be a stretch to see Amazon, come out with their own game console.
Oh yeah.
It would be, I think reading about or doing all the history on Xbox when they broke into the game industry in the early 2000s. I think it was something like 10 or 12 billion dollars was the final number of how much they spent to quote unquote break into just the stranglehold that Nintendo and Sony had on the market at the time. But I mean, okay, whatever, 10, 20 billion dollars. I don't want to say it's chump change, but Amazon has that kind of money.
They could, they could literally make that investment.
And for an industry, the gaming industry last year, topped out at $100 billion industry.
Wow, right.
It's just not, it's like, it makes sense if you have that kind of money to spend it, whether it's on a new game console or some kind of revolutionary way to harness the computation of all of their servers in a way that delivers an experience to users that they've never had. It's just
right. And what's the other MO that Amazon has is if you sign up for Prime, you're pretty much in on everything.
Right.
And everything else that they do, they sell at a great discount. So if, again, this is total speculation, if there is a console coming from them, is it going to be a much more affordable format? Those are things you got to think that
kind of a loss leader.
Right. They've got that infrastructure behind them that they could totally undercut everybody and saturate the market quickly because they're not just a gaming company, and they could really, I don't know. It's exciting to think about it. It could be something really cool.
Well, it's like we talked about with David Eddings when he was talking about what they're doing at Rooster Teeth, or what what they're planning to do is, it's reach their audience, which in the marketplace now, I feel like niche is king. Finding your niche audience that likes this specific thing.
Yeah.
Because, we just don't live in the era of Cheers and Friends and Cosby Show and like 5 shows that reach 70 million people each. We live in the world of 700 shows that all reach 500 people each.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of sad, especially as a content creator. It's like, oh, I'd like to reach more people than that, but it's also
but at the same time there's at least demand and draw for other content creators to have sort of an influence on media and entertainment. So, all right, well, I think we should put a wrap on this episode. Another one bites the dust, as it were.
Yes, big thanks to Lewis Castle. What am I saying, Lewis Castle? Big
Warren
thanks
Davis.
to Warren Davis. Yeah, thanks, Warren, for coming on. Very interesting conversation, not just about his career, but just technology and predictions. We should almost make that like a segment with each guest. What are your predictions? Because everybody has such different ideas.
Right? Yeah. Be interesting. Maybe we'll do that. It makes me want to bust out my old Laserdisc player, which I do have somewhere.
Makes me want to go to Cidercade, my local arcade, and play some Q*bert and some Aerosmith
Revolution X. Yeah,
Revolution X, which they have both of.
Do they really? Nice.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you again, the listeners, for tuning in. Really appreciate all the folks that listen. If you enjoy the show, by all means, you can contact us at mediajuicepodcast@gmail.com, Twitter and Instagram at Mediajuice Studios, or Facebook at facebook.com/Mediajuice Studios. And if you would find it in your heart to go on to iTunes and rate and review the show, or whatever format you're listening to, whether it's iTunes or not, any reviews or comments you could leave there all help this show to be found by more and more folks.
And there's really only one guideline for that, is if you do rate or review it, just make it really good. That's all we ask.
Yeah, just use lots of really good adjectives to describe how amazing the show is.
That's it.
That's
the only thing we ask. Yep.
But other than that, I think we're done with this show, and we can sign off now.
That's right. See you guys. See you next time.
Take care.